Hello and welcome, everyone. We are returning now after a brief break for a fabulous holiday to Emma Cox's wonderful Emma Explores. And today we have Emma Cox, of course, of Journeys into Genealogy podcast, joining us for another episode of Emma Explores. In this fabulous series, she takes us with her by the hand into a journey into her own family history research, what she's discovered and where she's found new things. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the writers and journalists in her family tree and what she found and where we're going with that. So with that, let me get out of the way and give it to Emma Cox. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I'll just share my screen and then everybody can see it. Give me a moment. Go back over here. Everyone see that okay? Yep, good. So, as Barbara said, I'm Emma Cox, and today I'm going to share about some of the writers and journalists in my family tree. For anybody who doesn't know me, or is this the first time they've come to listen to one of my talks, I'm a family historian and a genealogist and a Huguenot descendant via my father's mother. I help people find out about their ancestors, put together family trees and charts, investigate DNA and find living relatives, edit and write books, and take people on tours of the places their ancestors lived and worked. I've got a podcast called Journeys into Genealogy, and there are 95 episodes on there, and I interview experts and people with interesting family stories. So today, we're going to look at some of the ancestors who were writers and journalists, and we're going quite a long way back in my family history, and we're focusing on one particular line. So the line is Fonblanque. So these are the people who came over as Huguenot refugees back in the 1740s, and this is some of their descendants. So on the screen here, you can see I've highlighted a few people, and these are some of the people that we're going to be talking about today. So we've got John Anthony, and then we've got his son John, another son Thomas, another son Albany, and then going down to John Samuel Martin, John number two's granddaughter Ethel. So they did different types of writing. So I'm just going to share some of the different things that I've managed to discover about each of them. So we're going back to John Anthony. So he was born in 1760 and he died in 1837, and he's my 4 times great-grandfather. He was what they call an equity lawyer. So basically, he was involved with actually drawing up some of the laws of the country. He was a king's counsel, so that means he was one of the close advisors to the king for legal matters. He was also a friend of the Prince of Wales, and apparently he was credited with writing some letters, which were supposedly from the Prince of Wales to his father, George III, he wasn't very happy about being excluded from the army. So apparently he was the author of those letters. He's also known as the father of the English bar. Now, the English bar, for anybody who's not in England, basically means the people who are the legal system in England and Wales. He was author of some very serious sounding documents or books here. So a treatise on equity. He wasn't the original author, but he edited it so significantly that he basically rewrote it. A serious exhortation to the electors of Great Britain in 1791, and doubts as to the expediency of adopting the recommendations of the Bullion Committee in 1810. I'm sure that those were absolutely scintillating reading, certainly from nowadays, but at the time, and for this particular audience, they were significant. And his treatise on equity is still referred to nowadays. This is a picture of his arms, which are actually in the Middle Temple in London. So London has three main things. It has the Inner Temple, the Middle Temple, and Lincoln's Inn. And these basically are places where lawyers of different kinds have their offices. So he was part of the Middle Temple, and this is what sits actually in the dining hall of the Middle Temple. all written in Latin. So this is a picture of one of his books, A Treatise of Equity, with the addition of marginal references of notes, volume 1 of 2. And that's actually a picture of something that is actually available today. So if I wanted to go and get a copy of that book, I could go to somebody like eBay or something like that. And with the print on demand that you can get nowadays, I can actually find a copy of his book, which is pretty amazing when you consider how long ago it was actually written. So we're now going down to the next generation. So we're talking about John Samuel Martin. Now, he is my 3 and 4 times great-grandfather. For anybody who doesn't know, my ancestry can be slightly confusing because I descend from a brother and a sister. And because of one of them had children at 25-year intervals, the other one didn't. I have a missing generation and their descendants married each other. So basically, I have the same couple as 3rd and 4 times great-grandparents. And this is the man of it, as it were, John Samuel Martin Fonblanque, JSM, as I call him. There's a rather lot of Fonblanques. They all start with John, and trying to distinguish them, I've used their initials. So I've got John, I've got JSM, and I've got JB, just so that, and otherwise it takes too long to write things like that down. So he was one of the first commissioners of bankruptcy. That basically meant that he went around the country and presided over a bankruptcy court. So if people were going bankrupt for whatever reason, they had to appear in front of a judge, and he would have been the judge they appeared in front of for a particular part of the country. When they were first set up, there were only about 8 of them. So they obviously had quite a large range of places to go to in that time. He was co-founder of a journal called The Jurist, or quarterly journal of Jurisprudence and Legalization, volumes 1 to 4 from 1827 to 33. In addition to that, because he was a commissioner of bankruptcy, if I ever do a search for him online on something like the British Newspaper Archive, there are thousands of responses of records of him, because he sat and he judged lots of people for their bankruptcy things. So picking out the things that are of interest, which are family things generally, because obviously lots and lots of bankruptcy things isn't particularly what I need to know about. You have to be careful with looking for all. So it has made finding, there's a lot of information about him there, but you have to wade through it to find the right bits and pieces. Again, he wrote quite a few significant books. He wrote something called Medical Jurisprudence, 3 volumes in 1823. And observations on the bill now before Parliament for the consolidation and amendment of the laws relating to bankruptcy. So medical jurisprudence is still available, and I have an eBay alert that comes up very regularly, and I get all of these books that people are reprinting and everything, because they're all out of copyright. So lots of people are actually sort of taking advantage of this and actually making the print on demand available. This is a picture of him. See, he's standing there with a very smart umbrella and top hat. So that's obviously him in later life. He moved down to Brighton in later life and lived there in his retirement and died there. Now we move along to one of his brothers. So his name was Thomas de Fonblanque. He was born in 1793 and he died in 1861. And he was my 3 times great uncle. Don't descend from him. He's literally just an uncle. He was a diplomat. So he was what they call the consul general in Belgrade in Serbia, in Eastern Europe. And there are quite a few articles about him online, because he was only a diplomat out there at the consul general in later life. And he was attacked by a soldier who was unhappy with the way things are going in Serbia. And they basically he was injured, quite badly injured, and he was rescued by a couple of local people. And there are lots and lots of newspaper articles all about that. He also has some letters that he wrote, which are in the National Archives in England. And I recently discovered that his signature is available for sale on eBay for the handsome sum of over £600. So I thought, I'm not buying that one. I have been tempted to buy other bits and pieces, but I thought that's a little bit expensive. Now, the 3rd brother, the youngest brother, his name was Albany William de Fonblanque. He was born in 1794 and he died in 1872. Again, he's my 3rd times great uncle. This is actually a copy of a picture which is in the National Portrait Gallery in London. Now, he was more the journalist type. He didn't write he did write books. I'll go into those later, but he started off as a journalist. And he was the editor, and later he actually physically bought it, the Examiner, which was known as high-class intellectual radicalism. I think that's that's an amazing phrase to actually describe a journal like that. So basically, they wanted change, but they were quite clever about how they did it, I think is a good way of putting it. And the contributors he found included people like Charles Dickens and William Makepeace Thackeray. And I have got a picture, I've got a little carte de visite type thing of Charles Dickens in my family photographs. And I didn't really know why. And this must be one of the reasons why, because he was some sort of family friend. And he did make friends with lots of people. So they weren't just people that he took as being contributors to articles, to the things he ran or edited, but he actually did become friends with lots and lots of people, and he was very well thought of. And he changed how journalism was actually viewed, because prior to him being a journalist, journalists were viewed as being sort of scummy people, if is the right way of putting it. They weren't viewed as being terribly ethical or honest or anything like that, but he made people rethink how journalists were viewed. And he wrote lots and lots of novels. I'll go on to that in a moment. I just thought I'd put this in here. This is the front headline of the Examiner from Saturday, the 1st of October, 1853. And it just talks about ships of war in the Dardanelles. So there's all sorts of different things here, and it was sixpence. And it was issued number 2383. So it's obviously been going for quite a long time at this point. So I'm actually really, really fortunate in that I actually have quite a few of his books. And this is the first one. This is called Filthy Lucre, a story without a crime. And when I opened this up, it's actually got some reviews within it. So whoever owned this, and I think this was actually another ancestor, they actually took the time to actually get the newspaper reviews, them onto separate pages, and then stick them into the front of this book. But I think is a lovely way of doing it. And there's different things here. It says, oddly enough, extremely interesting, although no crime is recorded within it. And sort of, there's all sorts of different things. Thoroughly amusing, some passages of a very high order. The tale will certainly please. So this is the first book that I found here. And then there are various other ones. And obviously the condition of these is not brilliant. This is how I inherited them. And basically all I've done with them is put rubber bands around them after this to try and keep things in place. So I need to get somebody who's a bookbinder. And one of my cousin's cousins is actually a bookbinder. So I'm going to ask her at some point to try and help restore these. So I've basically taken them out, put bands around them and put them back in again. And they're in this nice trunk that I inherited from my great-grandfather, and they're safe enough in there for the moment. So he's got various different books here. So there's Pious Frauds, The Blackest of Lies, and Bad Luck being three of them. There's also a book called The Life and Labours of Albany Fonblanque, which was written by his nephew, and it includes a little biography of Albany at the front of it, and talks about him and his life and how he carried on and what he got up to. Then we move down another generation or two to a lady called Ethel Maud de Fonblanque. Again, this picture is in the National Portrait Gallery. She was born in 1858 and she died in 1942. And she's actually my first cousin 3 times removed. She's a little bit closer to me. Now, Ethel wrote poetry. And I have actually got a book of her poems. And I'm going to read one out to you because I think it's rather nice. So this is called When. When the earth woke up in gladness to welcome the rising sun, and the woods were filled with music, now the silent night was done, didst thou think of me as I did of thee? When the glare at noon was hottest and the fairy clouds on high, melted away in the azure that covered the sultry sky. Did thou think of me as I did of thee? When the shadows lay so deeply beneath the acacia trees, as I bared my throbbing temples to the welcome evening breeze, didst thou think of me as I did of thee? When the fragrant night closed round me, and I watched the stars first gleam, and the moon of languid beauty her glory on me stream, didst thou think of me as I did of thee? And she's got lots and lots of other poems within this book, and I just thought this was a rather nice one, and just thought, yes, I like that one. So she, I believe, I'm not sure if she was an actress as well, but certainly she wrote her book of poems. This is going to be quite short, so we're coming pretty much to the end of it. So I'm hoping that you're going to have lots of questions, and I'm going to show you lots of other things that I've actually got here. What helped me when I was actually doing all my research. So I'm really, really fortunate that I have inherited quite a lot of original material from my ancestors. So I've got copies of original books, I've got scrapbooks, I've got postcards, I've got all sorts of different things. And as I said, I've actually got 2 trunks of those. And there's one which is going to be a future one on a different line where somebody built a boat, and there's newspaper articles about that. So I'm preparing that for the future. So I've got 2 metal trunks full of all sorts of goodies inherited from my ancestors, as well as lots and lots of photographs and other books. Wikipedia. Now, you have to be a little bit careful with Wikipedia. By all means, have a look on there, but do try and actually verify what's actually written there. And if you want to, you can actually set yourself up with a Wikipedia account, and then you can actually add things about your own ancestors on there, which could be well worth doing. The British Newspaper Archive. Now, I'm just going to swap over and show you the British Newspaper Archive. Let's just find it. Where are we? Yeah, there we go. British Newspaper Archive. So this is just showing some of the results that I found when I did a search for John Fonblanque. Though at the moment I've got it set to between 1850 and 1899. And so it's got me information on here about when they died. This is all about the same person, death of Mr. Commissioner Fonblanque. So he was the man who was the Commissioner of Bankruptcy. And then this is Thomas de Grenier de Fonblanque. You can see on here that actually it hasn't recognized the text. This is automatically done. And if you want to, you can actually go in and change these so that people are doing future searches can find things more easily. And then it talks about births, marriages, and deaths and things like that. And if you want to, you can refine it down by different places. If I take off this search filter, then all of a sudden I've got older ones on here. And then this talks about one of the documents here published by John Fonblanque, Esquire, barrister at law. And then I can zoom in. And this is his treatise of equity that I referred to. So we're back in 1793 here. And it tells me who it was printed by, with addition of notes and everything like that. So I think it's an amazing resource being able to look at the British Newspaper Archive and find all these references to all the different documents that my family produced, documents, journals, and books. eBay. I don't know if any of you have ever looked for anything that your ancestors do on eBay. I did a talk recently about postcards on my Journeys into Genealogy podcast, and one of the things that Helen was recommending was doing a search for the place that your ancestors lived. So she was talking about being as specific as the building that they lived in if you knew the physical address. And that could be useful if you're looking for information on your family, obviously, but also it can tell you if they lived there, they might have actually touched something, you never quite know. And you can set up alerts for different things on eBay. So I highly recommend that you do that for your ancestors. Abe Books. Now, I mentioned earlier on, I'll just have to bring this up, about being able to find things that are relevant to your ancestors. So if I go onto Abe Books, and if I type in Fonblanque, you can see that I can find actually that is a genuine copy of How We Are Governed, which is one of the Albany de Fonblanque books, available for £5 if I wanted to buy it. And it gives me more information about it. So again, things like Aid Books and other secondhand booksellers can be really useful if you're looking for things for your family. There are various different ones out there. There's aidbooks.com and .co.uk and a couple of other ones in this country, and there are likely to be other ones in other countries across the world. Other online booksellers. The History of Parliament Online. I don't know if anybody's ever used that. Let's just have a quick look at his entry on there. So this is going back to the first John Fonblanque. So it tells me his history. It actually gives me a little mini biography at the top of it here. It tells me who he married, who he's the son of, and things like that. And it gives me a biography. It talks about his political things. So there's all sorts of different bits of information there. So the History of Parliament Online can be really useful for finding out about your family if they were ever involved with politics. Google searches, just a standard Google search. I'll show you another one. Let's go over here and just do a search for John Fonblanque. For anybody who's not familiar with what I'm doing, if you put something within quotation marks, it will search for that exact phrase. So that can be useful if you want to. And you can be more sophisticated than that. And you can put exclusions on there as well if you want to. So this John Fonblanque comes up with John Anthony Fonblanque at the top as a politician, the one that I talked about. This is the website that I've put together, which I'm putting out there to actually help Fonblanque cousins come to me. So this is part of my one name study for Fonblanque. You've also got things like Hansard, which is the official record of Parliament in England. So you can see on here that it will tell me that John Fonblanque was actually very briefly an MP for Camelford, which is down in Cornwall, between 1802 and 1806. And then this, I actually came across this earlier on, and I've got this sitting here. This is apparently something which has got his autograph on it. So this one's £90. And so this is something that I might be more inclined to actually buy. I haven't decided yet. So basically, this is telling me what's on there. And it actually tells me more about the document as well. So you're not just buying the signature, you're buying a document that he has signed. There's all sorts of different things on here. University things, Cambridge University Press. This is saying famous Charterhouse alumni. He went to Charterhouse School, so he appears in the list there. It doesn't tell me a great deal more information other than that he was on there. And you can see there's lots and lots of other things, mainly about legal stuff. So, but there's lots of people actually still make references to him nowadays. And when you're doing Google searches, you can also set up Google Alerts. Let's just have a look at mine. Hopefully it'll go in without asking me for anything. So these are the ones that I've got sitting there at the moment. You can see that I've got one for my name. I share my name with a few other people, so I get that coming through every day, and not a lot of it's mine. Horace Cox is another one of my ancestors who was a publisher. I've focused today purely on journalists and writers. I've got several people on my Cox side who are also publishers, so I thought I'll do them separately because they've done an awful lot of other things. I'm interested in DNA and epigenetics, family history, Fonblanque's on there, and genetic genealogy. And it's very simple to just save all these, and you can either choose to have an alert that sends you things on as a one-off basis, or once a day, or as things occur. So it's up to you what you want to do, but I highly recommend things like Google Alerts, because you then get your emails and you can choose to do what you want with them. Some of you may have seen this before, my spreadsheet for an individual. So with this one, I'm suggesting that you add occupations to it, and you add publications, find old covers of magazines and newspapers, covers of books and things like that. I'm just going to go and find eBay for you and just show you what I mean by this. If I look on here and I put in Fonblanque, actually I'm going to do, yes, let's do Fonblanque and just see what comes up on this one. So now I've got a letter that's appearing, which is signed by Albany Fonblanque saying he was a friend of Dickens there. So I can choose to save that, and then I can actually choose to actually be informed about it. So you can see we've got new copies of old books and all sorts of different things on there, including some photographs of Fonblanque Road in Sheerness in Kent. And it's one of my mysteries is I don't know why that was called that name. And here you go, £645 for the autograph that I showed you earlier on. This is a copy of some of the books that he wrote. Again, fairly original copies. I'm not sure if they're first editions or not, but these are the sort of things that come up on eBay. And then I can choose to actually save things and have an alert which will come up. That's actually not written correctly. So that's another thing to be aware of if you're doing these searches and it's for an unusual name. That's not finding Fonblanque, it's finding Fonblanque and Fonblanque. So if you're doing searches for any of these things, put in the incorrect spellings as well that you come across so that you can find them again in the future. And you can just basically add all of these different things in, and I get the different alerts coming up on a fairly much a daily basis for some of them. And then I can choose to actually go into them and save some of the images. I'm not using them publicly, so I think that's okay to do that, of some of the documents and books and things that I'm actually finding online. And then I've got a record of it, because one of the things I do want to do is for Horace Cox, who's a publisher, I'm trying to put together a library of the different books that he published, because that doesn't seem to appear anywhere. And at some point, we'll probably put together a Wikipedia article on him, which references a lot of those. So, any questions today? I'm going to stop sharing now.
I have one for you. Do
Okay.
you have any, my lips will move soon at some point. Do you have any idea why that signature is worth so much money?
I think it could have been because he was a diplomat. He was a consul general. So I don't know, really. It could be that somebody is just trying it on in some way and that they think it's worth that, because I wouldn't necessarily have thought it's worth that much money. And certainly when you see the other ones are worth sort of £90 for different ones. So £650 is a lot of money for a signature.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, you certainly sent me off. I was listening to your podcast just before our program about with your guest about postcards, which was lovely. And I'd actually heard it earlier, but it was a reminder to go back and enter my search into eBay, which I did. I didn't find anything, but it's a principle thing. I love that idea. My grandparents lived in the same home that my cousins lived in, so there was like 90 years of our family occupying this home, and it was pretty sweet to be able to enter the address and have a confidence that if some postcard turns up that I'll probably hear about it. That's pretty
And
neat.
it might be something else other than a postcard. You never know. So there can be all sorts of things. So I've got. I had a look. I haven't done a search for it. I did a search, but I haven't saved it. There's a place called Moat Mount, which was owned by one of my ancestors, and the building doesn't exist anymore, and it's like a public park. And someone came up with, there was a piece of china, so there was a plate that someone that had a picture of the house on it. And that's not the sort of thing I would have expected to have come up in a search, but it did. I'm not going to buy it, but it's like nice to know that that's there. And then there were other pictures, there were photographs and things like that. So you never know what will come up in things like eBay searches. So it's always worthwhile doing things like eBay searches, pardon me, Google searches, anything like that for names, places, occupations, whatever you're interested in, and just see what comes up.
Yeah, I just did that for for a beach that no one knows the name of on Oahu in Hawaii. And sure enough, somebody wrote a memoir with that name, Malaikahana. Very cool.
I have a question. I don't know. It may be too far back for a lot of the typical searches. Most of my research has been in the United States, but for one of my particular lines, I am back to the early 17th century. And I've written down, the suggestions that you had, like, to set Google alerts and to look on eBay. It's just, do you have any suggestions of where I might look online? Anything for the UK that I could at least try for results? I'm looking in the Cambridge area.
Okay, so you've got different Cambridge universities. You've got things like the British Library. I don't know if you've had a look on the British Library at all.
Okay,
So that's the
yeah.
main British Library, and that's supposed to have a copy of pretty much every book that's ever been published in this country, certainly for the last several hundred years. I would look for maybe some of the Cambridge museums. What do they do? Do you know their profession or anything?
Well, my immigrant who came here first came here in 1654. I don't know what he did before he came, but his father was a deacon at Great St. Mary's in Cambridge. So I have found documents that he signed. And I do know that they're my 7 times great grandparents that I believe he also came to Virginia and died here, but I know his wife is buried in King Edward Church right down the road from Great St. Mary's at Cambridge. So I have found that, and I have gotten the records from the record office that, the basic records like birth records, marriage records. But, I'm at the point now where I'm trying to find out more about them. So I don't know what his official profession may have been, other than he was a church warden at one time and he lived in that area.
It's worthwhile checking things like the clergy list. If you have ancestors who are bishops or vicars or anything like that, and just seeing if anything appears on there. Have you come across that?
I haven't. For him, I have my known ancestor on this end, and I have a family on the other end. I don't know if they connect or not. There was the Boatwright line is the one that I'm working on. There was a John Boatwright who was head of a department at Corpus Christi College at Cambridge, but this was back in the 1400s. But I think he was clergy, so I don't know if his family is related to mine or not. I have found information about that. They're in the same area, but I don't know yet if they're connected. So
I would go to things like the colleges, if you know the name of any of the colleges, and ask for their archives and see what information they have and where they can take you. So one of my ancestors, his name was Thomas Hodges, and he was a vicar, like an interim vicar down in Charmouth, which is in Dorset on the south coast. And apparently he acted as an agent for Mary Anning, who was a young woman who found lots of fossils. And she was quite well known about finding lots of fossils, dinosaur fossils, on the coast. And he acted as her agent. And I contacted somebody at one university and I said, do you know anything about him? And because it said that he was a friend of somebody else who set up one of the museums up there, and they suggested contact the museum. And so it's like a chain. It's someone sending you off in one direction, then someone else having a suggestion, and then just seeing what happens as a result of that.
Okay. Yeah, thank
but
you.
approach the different colleges. If you know of professions and things like that, go to where you think records might be stored. Try Google searches. Just look and see what information might be out there and ask for help.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I just like it's a case of I don't know what I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of starting to flail around till I just find something.
Well, if you go back to the thing you do know, the thing that you're sure of, and then start from there and just say, right, and I know that they were definitely living in this place, or I know that he was definitely this is what he did as a profession, and then start from that point and just see what comes. and put questions out there and ask for help, and just say this is one of your, not quite a brick wall, but it's an area that you're actively exploring, that you want to find out more, you know about bits and pieces. You can have a Google alert for different things about your surname, different spellings of your surname, so that you see if anything comes up with that. Look on things like the British Newspaper Archive. If your ancestors ever did anything, and or they were ever part of the aristocracy in any way. I was having this conversation with somebody, and they were saying that they thought somebody came from a castle, but it seemed like it was unlikely. And I said, well, when people were a part of families with large numbers of children, there were limited things as to what they could do, and limited money. Obviously, even if they had a lot of money, there was still a limit to it. So it's like the first son was normally the one who inherited, the second son was likely to go into the military, the third son might have gone into the clergy, the fourth son might have done something else, and then the fifth or sixth son might have done something really humble. And it's not necessarily something that you would think would be associated with that family, but because there wasn't anything for him, he was forced to go in a slightly different direction. So if you think there's something there may well be, but it's a matter of then trying to find it. And when you're looking for things, you can find, they had things like visitations, and people put together pedigrees. So they had heralds going around the country a few centuries ago, and they would actually talk to people just to make sure that they were who they said they were, and who they their ancestral line, and who their descendants were, and that sort of thing. So they pull things together, and then people have used those to create pedigrees, and they're sort of saying, well, you're a descendant, can you come down from Edward III via this line? And it goes all over the place. It's not necessarily a line that goes straight downwards. And it's worthwhile seeing if there's anything like that when you're looking for your ancestors.
Thank you very much. Gives me something else to work with.
And look for living people who've got your surname or similar to your surname, because I know somebody who's called Botwright, and he lives locally to me, and so it's like, it's not that different from you. And then if you compare with the living people, it's like, what line do they go back up, and do you intersect at any point?
Right, because I have seen it spelled Botwr.
Yeah, that's how he spells it. Yeah.
And I mean, that was my person. So I know I'm always having to put in 4 or 5 different spellings every time I search, because there are so many different ways. But yes, that was one of the ways.
Emma, you mentioned these heralds and the capturing of the lineage, the pedigree. Is there some consolidated place where these kinds of things are captured?
There are a couple of heralds visitations. I can't remember the dates of them offhand, but basically, if you type in heralds visitations, and they did them by counties normally, and so they would go and spend the time. They would literally not drive around, but to go around on horseback, I imagine at the time, and go and visit people and get the information from them, and then write it down and record it, and then. But just like a herald's visitations.
That's HERA, right? Herald, as in
Yes.
heraldry.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
And
Very
you never
nice.
know if you fit into those things somewhere. As I said,
Yeah.
it's like you can have quite humble background, and then all of a sudden you can connect in.
Wow. I had no idea. Oh, and of course, Internet Archive is still recovering.
Yes.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah, my family, by the way, 1654, also a big year of my family too, in terms of coming to America. But one of those, yeah, the Great Migration. There was a lot of us. But one of my
Weren't a lot of you.
families,
It was a consolidated time, wasn't it? There weren't that many people.
there were things happening.
Yeah.
It was a time to get out of Dodge. Um, one of my family lines that came from Yorkshire, um, was around in that period. And so this is a great, a lot of times these things, the records are, yes, we start in the 1800s. I'm like, yeah, nothing. Come on, man.
And a lot of American people have actually got pedigrees that go back. And so you just need to clarify them and make sure they're correct. But a lot of people were very keen on trying to prove things a couple of hundred years ago. So you may well find, if you can link into that, that you can make a really big jump all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. And I can already tell that many of the things, the American bits are complete fabrications.
And that's one of the things you also need to be careful of if you use things like this Burke's peerage and things like that, because I know that my great-grandfather was asked, what do you know about your ancestors, in order to create the entry in there, and that's obviously only as good as the knowledge that he knew that was available to him at the time. And I've actually got the letters that it were exchanged between him and the people who are compiling it, so it's not necessarily 100% correct.
Sounds a little like Who's Who. You pay to be printed, and yay.
Yeah.
Linda, you had a question?
Well, I'm thinking, I don't have anybody that's famous. I don't have anybody, and my grandparents were the only ones that came to Canada, and we're the only family left because the only cousin I had on that side has passed away from my dad's sisters. They're all, sister is gone, and now her son and family are gone. So how do you begin? Do I start with their names? Like my grandma and grandpa's names that came to Canada?
Do you know where they came from? Did they come from England
from
or Scotland?
From Kent.
From Kent. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything else at all. Now I know grandma had some brothers, but I mean, nobody came to Canada. So I don't know anything. Really.
Well, I would start looking
where
on things.
Where would I start?
Do you have an ancestry subscription?
No.
Do you have a subscription to anything?
No.
Do you, if you don't, then I would try something like Family Search and have a look on there and put your grandfather or grandmother's names in there separately. See if you can find, did they get married in Canada, or were they married when they came out?
In England, yes. I have their marriage record.
Okay, so you would know what their parents' names are, their father's names.
Probably. I haven't looked at that for a while.
If you have a marriage certificate, you normally have the father's names.
Yeah,
on
I don't have a certificate. I just have a printout of where they were married and stuff.
What you can do, you can have a look, and if you can get a copy of their marriage certificate, if you know when it took place, you can actually ask for it from the General Register Office, which is GRO, and they will actually send that via post to you. Obviously it will take a little bit longer, and you'll pay for it. I think it's about £11 plus postage or something like that, roughly. Might be a bit more than that, but you can get that. And on that certificate, it should give the person's father's name, but it gives the bride and groom their occupations, both their father's names and both their father's occupations. Sometimes it will say if the fathers are living or deceased. Obviously that depends on each individual ones, but as a general rule, that is the sort of information you get. So then you can start looking backwards. If you are fortunate enough to go to Scotland, you get so much more information. You get both parents, you get the mother's maiden name, you get all sorts of information. Also on death certificates, you get who they were married to and everything. So Scottish records by Scotland's people are brilliant. If you have Scottish ancestors, have a look on there and look for those. The other ones, I would start with things like Family Search. Consider taking out an ancestry subscription temporarily. You can do it on a monthly basis.
Also,
Barbara, what were you going to say?
Many public libraries, I know here, at least in the US, offer free access through the library to Ancestry, including online. You don't have to go to the library to do it, which is genius to me. That's what I do. So any particular record, any particular person, in my case, the best records are already in Family Search. So I'm filling holes with documents and things that are in Ancestry. The ones in Ancestry are actually kind of messed up. So I don't actually use their trees or anything, but the records are interesting.
So, but the thing about Ancestry, it's quite good because if you set up a family tree on Ancestry, you can set yourself up with a free account, but you can't do a tree unless you pay. You have to subscribe to do that, but you can subscribe for a month and see how you get on. And if you stop subscribing, it still stays there, but you just can't edit it. And then you can choose to subscribe or not subscribe. It's up to you going forward. It gives you hints. So you obviously have to be careful with the hints because they're not necessarily correct, but it will actually come up and suggest documents. If you're searching for it, it'll say, do you want to look at these ones? Or it'll say that I've got this one here. I think this is this person's parent. So obviously you do have to be careful when you're looking, but it's worthwhile checking that. There's also another subscription site called Find My Past.
Oh.
So that's worthwhile looking at as well. You can subscribe on, I think, a quarterly basis for that one. I can't remember if you can do monthly as well. Those two are probably the best ones if you want to look for records over here other than Family Search.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll see what we can find.
Whereabouts in Kent did they come from?
Well, near Margaret. Near Margaret somewhere, I think there was the grandma.
Margate. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the grandpa, I don't know. It just said he was born in something Kent, I think, on my thing. Just hang on. I think I got it here.
I'd say the first suggestion is to get their marriage record. And then you've got the information on there, you know where they were married.
Well, okay. It says for my grandpa, he was born in Preston, Kent, England in 1889.
Preston. Okay, I'm not familiar with that. I live in Kent, and it's
yeah,
like,
well, I know you do. And when I asked you the last names, you didn't know them either. So, because one was Bradley, and one was Gurr.
Do you want to send me the document or send me a picture of the document?
No, I don't have a document. This is just, oh, well, yes, I can send you that. Just give me I need your email though, right?
It's on the screen there.
Is it?
emma@emmacox.co.uk.
I can't see it.
Okay. emma@emmacox.co.uk. Just send me that through and I'll do a little bit of digging and see if I can find anything for you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, they were married in England. Yeah. Before they came. Well, Grandpa had come to Canada and then he went back and got married, and then they both came in 1916. Yeah.
You happen to have a Kent expert right here.
I know. Well, that I know. But when I asked her the name, she said, I don't know those names. So
well, she doesn't know everybody that was ever born.
It is a big place. Do you know Beeching? Yeah. Do you know the last name Beeching?
I do know the last name Beeching because Beeching actually in England has got quite a historical significance, because there was somebody called Beeching who actually made lots of changes to the railways here and basically closed lots of things down. So there's that Beeching, and funnily enough, there's also somebody called Beeching who is buried in the church down the road from me, and I was talking to somebody about that yesterday. So yes, Beeching is a local name.
He lives in Margaret. But he's 96 years old, and I can't even talk to him now. His memory is starting to go and stuff. So, but we only found him he found us, I guess, a few years ago. Yeah. Yeah. And
well, you're likely to have other cousins and relatives.
That was on my grandma's side. Yeah, we don't have it because there was only my dad and an aunt, and she only had this one son. So there's nobody there, and there's just us 5 kids in my family, but nobody's interested but me. So I'm trying to find out all this stuff myself, right? Yeah. Anyway, thank you. I will do that.
They discover another cousin that has been looking for the lost Canadian family.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You never know, I guess. Yeah.
You know, in the point about writers and so on, my great-grandfather was a newspaper publisher in a small town in Kansas in the United States. And so his name appears in a lot of things. And I started searching to your tips, and I found a site called UNZ, U-N-Z. They call themselves the Alternative Media Selection, which turned up like 20 of his articles in various publications and things like that. So much so that I have to reboot my Chrome. I don't dare do during the call. But yeah, these are all like from 1902 to 1925, something like that, various articles. But what I think is interesting, the one I want to read that just crashed on me, is The Indian's Last Stand, because he was a writer talking about the changing West. He moved out to the American prairie in well, he was in the 1860s, is when he was born, and then, you know, raised from that period, watching all of the changes, the fundamental changes from kind of a cowboy culture and the demise of the buffalo and the relations with Native Americans and all of these kinds of things. So an article called The Indian's Last Stand sounds pretty interesting.
I think it's fascinating to see what they did write about. So with my great grandfather, seeing the press cuttings that he's got, I can actually, give me a moment, I will share with you briefly. Hang on a tick. I'll find it before I share, and then you can have a look. So basically, I've got these books here. If you can see that, there's press cutting book number 2, and it's got an index in the front of it. And then basically he or somebody has stuck all of these in there. And so you can see this from the Daily Express, from the News of the World, the Evening News.
Can you make that full screen? Because we're seeing your desktop. There you
Yeah,
go.
can you see that?
Yeah, easier.
So a playwriting lawyer, modernized version of a biblical story, Havoc. 500th anniversary of Lincoln's Inn. Admiral's wife sues a cook. And I think the language that's used in some of these things is absolutely brilliant. And also seeing, so it's like Death of Mr. Albany Grenier de Fonblanque. So that's the Albany we were talking about earlier on. He basically did things which were cases he was interested in, things to do with family and all sorts of stuff, and seeing the same articles from different aspects. So you get somebody who's a very conservative newspaper to somebody which is more radical, and so you'll get different emphasis in the different articles. So I've basically put these up on my Fonblanque website. They're sort of semi-hidden, they're password protected so that people don't nick them or anything. But there's all this lovely stuff on here, and it talks about different things within that. Let's see if I've got the other book as well. It's book 2, book 1. Where's book 1? A judge on pins and needles. So you can see here, DSA colonel found dead in the Daily Mail and also in the Evening News. And so there's pages and pages of these different things on here. Guardian's dispute with chaplain. Let's go back to the other one. This is the second one to see if this is the one. British Embassy sensation, Brazil story of a resealed letter. And there are things in here about family as well. One of this was his brother, I think, took part in this fair. I can't remember exactly what it was. Tudor Fair at Bradenham. So you've got all the photographs of different things happening there.
In fancy dress.
In fancy dress. Somebody eloped. The arrival yesterday at the Grand Hotel Monte Carlo will lead to the withdrawal of a breach of promise action from the files of the High Court. The first woman to set up as an advertising agent. Legal notices.
So this is somebody's scrapbook.
Yeah, this is basically things, and he put things like dinners he went to, funeral services, all sorts of stuff in here. I was just seeing if there's any more family information about marriages and things. Who's that one? Ramsay de Fonblanque, I think that is that, or Robert de Fonblanque. That's his brother. Yes, that's his half brother died there. And even in here, it's like his first wife, my great grandmother, She was known as Dolly the Bolter, and basically, I'm just going to stop sharing again. And she disappeared on her second husband, and there was a press article where he was asking for her to return, and he kept a copy of that press article and supported her in later life. So there's sort of wonderful little stories in here about different things, and that's one of the things I'm sort of vaguely including in my 8 times great grandparents, because this is him, one of my great grandfathers, doing this. And if you can find things that your ancestors have written, if they've kept scrapbooks, anything like that, it's amazing what you can find within them.
I have a scrapbook that my great grandmother kept. So she has all these clippings and no dates, no publications, no dates, which is weird. She has one where she has the entire clipping, which was the obituary for her father-in-law, which is great, but she's handwritten the whole thing and she has the clipping. And I kept reading them. I'm like, why would you do that? It's very rude. I have no idea why, but yeah.
The other thing I've got is another great grandmother's diaries. So from her life in Scotland, she kept a diary every day. And it was very simple things. It's like, the weather was good, I put the washing up. I had a letter from so-and-so came to visit. And it's over a period of time, I think it's the 1940s and 50s, because she died, I think, in 1955. And it's just amazing. And it's like who she wrote letters to in the back of the diary. And the text is so small. Some of them are little 5-year diaries and 5 lines. And the 5 lines are that big. And so it's like, I want to go through them, but it's going to be quite a lot of work to actually extract all the information. But it's just her life, basically.
Linda, do you want to tell your story about your grandmother's diary?
I have my grandmother's diaries, but I don't have anything before 1930. This grandma that came to Canada, and it's the same kind of things, the weather, and we did a project, Barbara and myself, last year, and well, just I'll go get it, okay? Just hang on.
To me, this is such a fun project because it started with an inspiration she had from another project on Project Kin, said, wait, I want to do that. Here's what I want to do. And then actually did it. We love to celebrate this kind of thing.
Can you see this? Can you see this?
Oh, wow.
And it was, the excerpts there are when us 5 kids were born and baptized. That was what was in the, and those excerpts are taken from her diaries, and this is Grandma and some of her diary. Yeah.
Lovely. That's really, really good. And you've done that as a project recipe, have you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't have done it without Barbara, I tell you. I had all my mom died in 2015. So I had all her pictures, and my son got me into doing it. That's how I started on the pictures. And it took me 8 years to scan all Mom's pictures.
Wow.
Right? And then some of these pictures are from the pictures, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just lovely.
So
yeah. And do you have it sitting on the wall?
Well, it's supposed to go up here on this wall, but I'm waiting for some help to put it up there, because these other ones will have to move, right? But yes, yeah, it's going on this wall.
What I loved about your vision for that, Linda, was the insight that there was context of these little tiny writing of ordinary days.
Yeah.
So that's the first piece. The second was the insight that on the date that each of you were born, you know what that is. You know that she had feelings about that. You know about the baptisms, and you have some of these photos, and you had the location where she lived, and it was just charming to put all of those together. And then what did you do with those posters?
Put it all together, that's it.
Well, and you made a gift of them. You made a gift
Oh,
of
right.
them.
Oh, yes. I made a copy for each of my siblings. Well, my one brother's passed away, but his wife was from our hometown. So she was very interested. And my two sisters and my sister-in-law were really interested. I don't think my brother could have cared less, my oldest brother. Yeah, I don't think
Oh,
he
well.
could have, because he didn't,
Well,
all he commented was, how come it ends in 1984? And I said, well, it ended when you left the farm and you left that house and everything. So yeah, but he's older than me, and he wasn't really interested. The sisters and sister-in-law were all in tears when they received it. Yeah.
Could you do something which is more now and your children and grandchildren and everything?
Well, you know what? Yes, well, at the moment I'm trying to work on, my husband's getting dementia. And I thought I would start working, maybe, I don't have a lot to do with his background. And I'm trying to put together when him and I met, sort of thing, right? And but no, I should do something, because my children or grandchildren, I only have one son living, and it's his two sons. They don't know any of these people other than great grandma. They did know, but we didn't live with her, where she lived. So I thought I should start something maybe with my own life.
There, you can get books and things called grandparents' memories, which
Yeah.
are really good, and it might be worthwhile doing that with your husband, and just sort of seeing if he's can remember things, and if you prompt him, what things come out of it, because it's sort of, how did you meet, what's your favorite color, and what do you remember of your schooling, and all sorts of things like that. And it's little bits and pieces that a lot of people would never know unless they'd actually spoken to you about it. And if you could maybe get your grandsons to interview you, if they would be happy to do that, and ask you questions and record it, and then you've actually got the recording of that. You can do it, so you've got sound and vision if you want to. I
Sure.
talked to my great aunt when I was in my 20s, so it's about 35 years ago. And I basically went through the family photo albums with her, and she helped identify the people within them. And she told me stories of her grandparents, and she told me stories about little different things. And I wrote that down, and I've still got that piece of paper, and I've been back to that several times, and I've picked lots of different things out of that. And it's, if you don't do it, things are gone forever.
Well, that's why I thought I better start on some of his things. See, that's a second marriage for me, so I don't have a lot of his background, and they don't know much, because his dad came as one of those children from England.
Yeah.
Well, he was born in Scotland, but with those children that were sent to Canada. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't know much about them at all, because he was illegitimate and stuff like that. So, and
It's amazing what you can find out, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I've traced lots of people, DNA matches and things that have come through illegitimate lines that have gone back into my family tree, and I had no idea that all these people existed. And the sort of, it's like you're thinking, oh yes, you've got that name, okay, why have you got that name? And then you work out, well, who can it be? And then sometimes it's quite straightforward, and other times it's right, making the best of it. And I connected with a couple of people in Australia recently, so and the person out there, it's his grandmother, and she is actually almost a generation younger than her eldest brothers and sisters, and trying to fit people in, and sort of thinking, right, okay, well, her father, I think her father was illegitimate, if I remember rightly, or something, and he went out to, I can't remember all the details, but certainly I've actually managed to connect them all up, and it all fits with the DNA results. So that's another thing you could think of, is maybe, if you're interested, have a DNA test done and see what comes up about relatives in different places.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, This has
Thank you.
been another fabulous episode. Linda, we'll be circling back to you. I know you're familiar with all of the different projects, including Jude Rhodes' wonderful piece about creating memory books for family members. It's just sort of two different sides of the same problem. In one case, how to capture what they know now as they can talk about it. And second is to build materials that they can rely on essentially as therapy that can help them feeling better by spending time with things they do remember, as the disease captures the memory and keeps the person, are important steps to take. I want to thank you all for another wonderful episode. I'm going to stop the recording and take the conversation into the notes and comments from our recording as they get posted to projectkin.org/Emma Explores. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Emma.